Up now. All right. Hopefully you can all see my screen, and that you are here for our lunchtime webinar, which is Know It, Report It, Stop It, and Aquatic Invasive Species Response Training. So I'm Sarah Stallman. I am the extension leader for Pennsylvania Sea Grants. I'm going to be giving the presentation today. I'm from Sea Grant, like I said, and usually with presentations, I like to talk quite a bit about what Sea Grant is, but I have a lot of information packed in, so I did put this QR code up, which will take you to the Pennsylvania Sea Grant website. So if you are not familiar with Pennsylvania Sea Grant, I highly recommend that you check out our website. We have a lot of different resources on there, and you can see a little bit about who we are and what we do. Um, Questions, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat box. You can put them in at any time. You don't have to worry about waiting till the end of the presentation. Amber is here. She's a coastal outreach specialist with us, and she's going to help field some of those questions that you might have at the end. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm gonna do this a little bit differently today. Hopefully you're familiar with what a choose your own adventure game or story is. Essentially, it puts you in the driver's seat. So I was hoping to kind of make this as interactive as possible today. We have quite a few participants, so I don't actually expect you to be calling out or speaking anything, but there are going to be some choices. We're going to be kind of putting you to the test to see what kinds of choices that you would make when it comes to real world aquatic invasive species response scenarios. So you can use the chat if you do want to respond with what you would do in any of these situations. We invite you to utilize the chat box and put your answers in. You don't have to, but it would be more fun if you did. So hopefully this is engaging and fun for you rather than having me stand here and go through a response plan with you. So, to do a choose your own adventure story, you have to have a character. So, your character here in this scenario is that we're going to have you be a conservation district employee, and you're performing a routine maintenance on a flood control impoundment in Mercer County, Pennsylvania. It's called Pine Run Reservoir. It's about 7 acres. And it's also located fairly close, within 4 to 10 miles of other water bodies in the area, including Lake Wilhelm, Sandy Lake, Lake Latonka, as well as the Shenango River. So as you're performing your routine maintenance, you notice an unusual plant species floating in dense colonies on the water's surface. It covers a large portion of the reservoir. You also notice some strange spiky nut pods littered along the shoreline. So some of you on this call might already recognize what the species is, but you might not, and that is okay. Your quest for our Choose Your Own Adventure is to one, identify the new plant species, decide how you're going to respond to it, choose your path to take action, and see how those decisions affect the ecosystem, the community, and the resources. So Pine Run is depending on you. So, you happen to be carrying a copy of the Pennsylvania Field Guide to Aquatic Invasive Species. Hopefully, this is a resource that you have seen before, but if not, this is a fantastic resource. This is something that Pennsylvania Sea Grant developed. I think the first version might have been in 2013 or somewhere around there. And it has over 60 species of aquatic invasive species that are either in Pennsylvania or could be a threat to Pennsylvania. It's a small spiral bound waterproof guide that you can carry with you into the field, and it has a lot of identification information in it. The QR code there will take you to the Pennsylvania Sea Grant page. We have limited amounts of hard copies. They're very expensive to print, takes a while to print, so we have some copies, but there's a PDF, and you can request a PDF. It's really large, so I would have to email it to you, but you can get access to this resource. So you decide to check for an aquatic plant in this guide that you have with you that looks similar to your find. So you open up your book. This is what you see. You look through the plants and you see something that looks very similar, water chestnut or Trapanitans. So within this resource, you're able to see things like an overview of the species, what it is, where it's from, how you can identify it, very specific identification characteristics that are going to help you out in the field. Habitat spread, distribution. It does have these distribution maps that are by county. So the counties that are filled in are where reports have come in for the species, as well as environmental and economic impacts of the species. So, based on looking at this, you kind of have in your mind, I think what I found is water chestnut. So, what do you do? So, you have a couple options. Here's where you can kind of look and think to yourself, what would I do in this situation? So, your first choice is to take several pictures of your find. You can make note of location and the extent of the infestation. You can report the find to begin the rapid response process. You can do A, B, and C, or you can do E, nothing. Nature is nature. So it's up to you to make that decision what you're going to do next. But this one's a little bit of an easy one. So we're going to jump right to it and say that we're going to do these first three steps. We're going to take pictures so that we're able to send them for verification of identification. We're going to make sure we have details that we can share, and we're definitely going to report this species. But you have another choice to make. And this one, I'm actually more curious to see if people can put some answers in the chat for this one, because this one's kind of a trick in that all of these options that I have listed are viable options for reporting aquatic invasive species in Pennsylvania. So I'm curious what you would have done if you had found this species. So the first one is we do have a reporting hotline for invasive species in Pennsylvania. It is 1-888 invasive. If you call that number, you will have a menu of options to choose from. So you can report insects, you can report plants, you can report specifically aquatics. So you would choose that menu option, and then you could do it by phone to report an aquatic invasive species. Another option is B, which is to use the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission online reporting form. So if you go to Fish and Boat Commission's website, they do have a form online that you can use to report. And then C is to report the Pennsylvania or report the find to the Pennsylvania Aquatic Invasive Species Field Guide smartphone app. Or, of course, you could do nothing and tell no one. I hope nobody is putting D into the chat box. So, for the sake, again, these are all viable options, but for the sake of this presentation and for making a choice, what we are going to choose today is to C, report using the Pennsylvania AIS Field Guide smartphone app. I do see that there is a hand raised, but I'm going to ask to hold the questions or put them in the chat box, and I will answer them at the end of the presentation. So, if you're not familiar with the app, I highly recommend downloading this app. So, what I just showed you with the Pennsylvania Invasive Species Field Guide, it is essentially all of that wonderful information distilled down into mobile form. So, instead of carrying something with you that's a notebook or something physical that you have to carry, most people have their phones with them. You can download this right on your phone. There are versions for both platforms, Apple and Android. So you can use the QR codes there. Amber, I think Amber's putting some of the links in the chat if you prefer to use a link to directly access these, or you can go into your either Google Play Store or Apple Store and you can search for PAAIS Field Guide. So again, all of this information into this app, it's a really great resource. Highly recommend it. So this is what it looks like when you open the app. You're going to get to this screen right here. So if you're not sure what you're coming across out in the field, but you know where you are, there's an option here to kind of filter by county to see, like, is this something that's been reported here before? Maybe not, but maybe it has been, and you can look for something that way. You can also filter by taxa, or you can filter by both. If you don't filter at all, you're going to get a list of all the species that are present in the app and in the field guide. So if you were to scroll down here and click into water chestnut, What you're going to see is something very similar as far as data goes to what was in the field guide. So there's a number of pictures you can scroll through here. There is a general description of the species. And then each of these are accordion menus that you can click on, and it will expand into information about that species. So I just showed the map here, and I wanted to do that to point out specifically the difference between the print copy, which is something that gets updated maybe every 5 years or so, and we know that once we print something, a new occurrence is going to happen. So it's very, very quickly going to go out of date. Whereas we can actually update this in real time. So if we got a report right now, we could go in, update it, update the version of the app, and it will show up on there. So this is a lot more accurate with the reports that are happening. You can see down here at the bottom that, so we were just on the species. Now we're looking at articles. This is something else that's really nice within the app to get additional information. So for example, if you're not very well versed on leaf shapes, and arrangements and the names of those, but you're seeing that terminology in the field guide. There's some resources here to help you identify what kinds of leaves you might be seeing out in the field or parts of a fish, or root types, or fin shapes. There's also descriptions for different types of, this is an example of a diatom, but there's other algal groups in here for if you're not familiar with cyanobacteria or different types of algae. There's also information to help you out in the field if you need to collect a specimen or to make sure that while you're out there doing your work, you're not preventing the spread. But this is the key ticket item here that we're going to focus in on. This gives you the opportunity to report invasive species while you're out in the field. So there's a button down here that says report, and you can input all of your information into this field display here, including your contact information, phone number. You can put in where you are. You can select a species, but if you don't know at all, you have no idea what you're finding, it just looks weird to you, you can put you don't know. That is an option. You can also choose the severity of the infestation, like is there one? Is there a lot? Is there many of them? You put in your body of water. It also gives you an opportunity to put in notes, so your, exact location, any details that you want to include in that observation. I will also note that for the location details, this app does geolocate you. So you can, if you have that turned on your phone, it'll automatically put those GPS points into the app, so we'll know exactly where it is when you submit. And then you also have the option to attach photographs, which we highly recommend that you do when you're reporting. And I have to put this in here because we've had some very interesting photos be submitted with reports, really far away photos, really fuzzy photos, photos of green plants on top of grass. So I like to just throw in a little reminder of taking really good photographs is super helpful for us if we're trying to verify the identification of a report when it's coming in through the app. So it's really good to take it, the app will take 3 photos. So if you can take pictures of different angles, maybe one from a little farther away, one closer up, that's great. If you can include a reference object for scale so that we can see, whether it's your finger or right here, you can see that someone used a coin. That's always helpful so we can get a better idea of the size. If you can take photos of the immediate surrounding. Again, provide good background contrast. Don't put a plant on top of grass. Maybe try to get some contrast, put it on a rock or something like that. And then also, if you see anything distinguishing about the species, make sure you're taking pictures of that as well so that you can share. So congratulations, level up. You chose to report the infestation. So you have completed the first step in the rapid response process, which is detecting and reporting the infestation. So what happens next? So after a report is submitted, what you're seeing here is kind of the back end of the app. This is a database that exists on a website that we can go in and access, and all the reports that come in through the app go into this database. So you can see, these are actual past reports, things like you can see the species, where it was reported from. These are the coordinates that get reported with the app. This person probably didn't have their location services turned on when they used this body of water, who reported it. All the information is there, and we can open that up and get that information. All of that goes to myself, but more importantly, Sean Hartzell. If you don't know Sean, he is the invasive species coordinator. He's from the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, and he is like the key player here. All reports go to Sean so that he can then begin the rapid response process. So it doesn't matter if you're calling the hotline, if you're using the app, if you're using the Fish and Boat Commission reporting hotline. Everything is getting filtered to Sean so that he can then make decisions about how to start the rapid response process, who needs to be involved, who needs to get pulled in. So he's receiving all of those reports. So here's just an example of when you open up the report. So this is a water chestnut report here, and it's from Mercer County. So you can see that all of the information is input here, including the severity and some infestation details, such as approximately 6 acres of the 7-acre reservoir is infested with this plant. This photo, it has been included in the report showing the infestation, and also I couldn't fit them both on, but here's another photo which would be great to include on a report that's a little bit more close up. So Sean is able to look at this and say, okay, I can see the leaf shape, I can see the serrations, I can see the inflated bladders, the petioles on here. I'm going to confirm that this is a water chestnut. Regardless of what it is, Sean responds to all reports and says, thank you, we already know this is here, or thank you, we didn't know this was here, and we're going to take action on it. So he responds to all the reports and thanks people and lets them know that either action will or will not be taken. So what's happening here is Sean is following the procedures within our rapid response plan. So this is a plan that we actually started developing back in like 2010. It was officially approved by the Invasive Species Council in September 2014. So it became the official method for responding to invasive species in Pennsylvania. It really functions as this decision support framework that helps you move stepwise through the plan, who should be involved, what resources are needed. It has interactive tools within it, which you'll see some of in this presentation, to help you with decision making and understanding how the process works in Pennsylvania. So there is a QR code there that you can use to access the rapid response plan. Or again, I think Amber's, I can't see, but I think Amber's putting links in the chat. So if you want to follow along with the rest of the presentation, feel free. Otherwise, just know that this resource exists and it is out there for you to use.
Sarah, all the links are being updated in the chat as you present.
Thank you. All right, so we're back to making some decisions. So this is a decision that's more made from the back end of the report coming in, but it's important to understand what that looks like. So feel free, again, to still participate. So with this particular infestation, is this report a high priority for us? We all know that we have limited resources, limited time and manpower, so we might not be able to respond to every report that comes in. But here's some of the questions that we might ask to help us determine that. So A would be, no, it's not a high priority. It's already well established and is already being treated. It's one scenario. B is no, the species is new, but we have limited resources, and there's other higher priority things happening where we just can't get to it yet. C, no, temperature tolerance of the species wouldn't allow it to overwinter, so we might not make that species a priority. Or D, yeah, this is a new species occurrence to the area, and we know enough about it to know that there's impacts and it is a concern for us. So for this situation with water chestnut, and you being this conservation worker who is out there, has never seen this before, We're going to say D, yes, this is a new species occurrence to the area and it is a concern. So we're going to move forward with the rapid response process. And I will point out that just because you might answer no to some of these. It doesn't mean that the report isn't recorded, and it doesn't mean that we might not at some point come back to that report. For example, especially if it's B, where there's limited resources, some of those resources might become available, situations change, so it is something that we might come back to at some point. So the report still exists and it doesn't just disappear. So Sean then will make sure there's a lot of other really important aquatic invasive species mapping and tracking initiatives that exist out there, including IMAP Invasive, the USGS Non-Indigenous Aquatic Species Database. Some people like to use EDMAPs. So these are really, really important databases and resources to be able to look and track and see where invasive species exist within Pennsylvania. So these reports are shared so that we're keeping data consistent between these different initiatives. So Sean will then make sure that if the report isn't already in IMAP or isn't already in NAS, that it gets there so that, again, we're coordinating and sharing that information together. So the next step is really making sure that we have a really good understanding about the site. So in our situation, we're going to assemble a site assessment. And the purpose is to just gather as much information as possible. Resources might be needed at this point. So it is important to also consider partnerships at this point and think about, if you're a Mercer County Conservation District employee, are there state agencies we could pull in that have resources we might need? Are there other partners like Sea Grant, the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, Penn State, others that might have the resources that you can leverage to help make some of these things happen? So for our site assessment, we need things like kayaks and canoes, GPS units, vegetation rakes. We might need some field guides and also cameras to take pictures and really get a good idea of what our site situation looks like. So as you're taking part in the site assessment, you're taking notes on several features of the infestation. So first, looking at that geographic extent and taking note that this is an infestation that's localized to this reservoir. As far as we know, it hasn't spread any further and it's not in any of the surrounding lake systems. We're looking at the abundance. Again, we took note in our report that it's covering about 6 acres of the reservoir, so it's covering most of the reservoir. It's a pretty large extent of the infestation. We want to see, is there evidence of reproduction? It's pretty obvious with this since we were finding seeds initially when we found the water chestnut present. Those spiky spines are actually kind of those nut pods, and those can actually get down into the sediment and stay viable for 9 years or more. So we know that reproduction is occurring at this location. We can also infer things about the origin of the infestation. So, for example, we know that there's a healthy osprey and duck population at this particular site, which could have been an introduction point because water chestnut seeds can get stuck to their feathers. However, there is limited access, but it is open for public fishing, and there's also hunting in the area. So it is also possible that there was human-mediated movement of the species as well. So this is an opportunity to really just gather as much of that information as possible so that we can make good decisions moving forward. So here's where we're going to identify our goals. And again, take a look at these and feel free to input in the chat if there's things that you think we should be doing with this particular infestation. What do you think the most important goals are? You need your goals to help you figure out what your actions are going to be because those actions should be centered around your goals. They should be achievable, measurable, also flexible because we all know things change. And you can pick more than one. I typically recommend at least 2 to 3 because, for example, eradication, that's kind of always the one that pops up in people's mind. Like, well, obviously we want to get rid of the infestation, but it's not always feasible. So you might also look at things like avoiding further ecological harm from the species, making sure that you're maintaining recreation if that's a key use of the water body. or economic value, preventing further spread, so making sure that it's not getting into surrounding lakes, protecting human health, conducting further evaluation, engaging the public through education and involvement, or you could just do nothing at all. Sometimes that actually is a viable option. And this is not an extensive list. You can add your own goals as you go along. So we're going to choose a few of these goals for this particular infestation. We are going to try to eradicate because we would like to move towards that with a relatively closed system and a lot of different options for action, which we'll see in a few minutes. But we also want to prevent further spread to areas like the Shenango River and Lake Latonka. So we're going to do things that involve preventing further spread as well. And we also want to make sure that the public is involved, engaged, and educated so that we can also prevent further spread. All right, so we are at the point in the process where we kind of need to brainstorm every possible response option. And even if you kind of know it's kind of out there, maybe we don't have the funding available for it, this is kind of the point where you really just put everything out on the table and have conversations about it. A couple things to keep in mind when you're brainstorming and going through all of this is thinking about things like who's taking the lead on this, like who's the lead agency or organization, what resources do you have available, and what do you need? Are there permits or regulations that you have to consider as you're taking action? What are your funding needs? Obviously, that's a big one. So, how much is this going to cost and how much money do you have? What's your timeline for the response? Is this something that you can do immediately, or is it something that's more long term, or it's going to have to occur more than once? What available partners do you have? I already kind of mentioned the importance of leveraging partnerships and making sure that you're getting other people involved. And also considering things like any environmental, political, social, or economic impacts that your response might have, and thinking about that appropriately. And also thinking about your feasibility for success. So, how are you going to get the best bang for your buck by thinking about all your different response options? So I mentioned at the beginning that we have a number of tools within the rapid response plan to help with the decision-making process. So Appendix J is one of those, and it is a matrix of control and management, best management practices. So if you're trying to think, okay, I am trying to brainstorm what potential options that, I can take or actions I can take for this species, but I just really don't know. You can reference this appendix, and this is just a small snapshot of it. There's a lot more. But so if your goal is eradication, there's a list of different control and management options that focus a little bit more on eradication. So what you see here is things like chemical controls, like herbicides. It'll give you a relative idea of what the cost of that is going to be. So obviously $3 signs is going to be a lot more than having $1 or $2 signs. It'll give you some examples of species that are managed using that strategy, what the typical timing might be, and any other considerations that you might want to think about, like permitting and things like that. So it's a guidance tool that can be used if you're trying to brainstorm and think about what your response potentials could be. Then there's also a tool that allows you to sit down and really compare your options side by side. So you might be thinking about a number of different options, but you really want to lay out, well, what are the resources for each of those? What's the funding for each of those? Do I know somebody who can help with this? How long is it going to take to get a permit for each of these? So it's a tool that can just help you kind of lay out all your options and help you to compare them. And this does not mean that one option is going to be chosen. Um, you could choose different options and combine them and use them in tandem together to formulate a response. But this is just a way to kind of look at, kind of your options and what that might look like for you in the scenario. So we are going to choose our response actions for water chestnut in Pine Run Reservoir. So we have options like physical removal, like going out and doing hand pullings, mechanical removal, chemical removal using things like herbicides, doing education and outreach activities, or all of the above. I'm going to pause just for a minute and take a drink of water and allow you to think about that and maybe put in what you might consider doing in the chat. And I do want to make sure that you're remembering to keep our goals in mind. All right, so hopefully you're putting in the chat what you think would be the best actions to take for water chestnut. I'm gonna say that we are going to do all of the above. So we got lots of work to do. So our next step is to develop an action plan for each of those. So let's start with our physical removal option, which is hand pulling. When you're developing an action plan, we list everything out. So this action is hosting water chestnut hand pulling event at Pine Run. We know who the lead is. It's going to be Mercer County Conservation District. We've got partners that can assist with this. We've got state parks that are in the area that are local, and district staff and interns that can help with this. We can enlist local volunteers and groups like Master Watershed Stewards. We know that this is something we can do relatively quickly and easily, so it's an immediate time frame with minimal cost. The benefit here, again, quick and easy. It helps create public involvement and a sense of that kind of community science opportunity. And also, um, again, raises awareness. Resources needed are things like kayaks and canoes to actually go out there. It really doesn't require too much. You might need some gloves, and some other tools. Cons are thinking of, okay, we're going to have a lot of plant material. As you can see in the image here, we're going to have to figure out a way to dispose of that plant material. So let's go ahead and take action on that. Let's host a 2-day hand pulling event. We've got several volunteers who've showed up. We've got people here bringing their kayaks and canoes. However, we find at the end of the 2-day period that the event cleared less than a quarter of an acre of the 6-acre infestation. So we have deemed that hand pulling alone is not a viable option. But is the game over? No, we want to continue and we want to look at other options. So next we're going to look at mechanical removal as a potential option. So as we sit down and have conversations, we consider the use of aquatic plant harvester. So as we kind of talk through this, somebody brings a point to we don't really have access areas to launch the harvester. So that's a big problem. It's not financially feasible. It's very expensive to get a harvester. And in addition to that, aquatic harvesters can actually facilitate the spread of especially aquatic plants because they can reproduce through fragmentation. So there's just too much of a high risk involved in this one. So we're going to game over this one as well and say we're not going to invest in a mechanical harvester. We're going to continue, however, and look at some additional options. So next we're going to look at chemical control. So our action is to treat the infestation with aquatic herbicide. Again, the lead is Mercer County Conservation District. We might need some funding assistance, so we can look at things like Palms, who gives out some mini grants to help with control. The Crawford County Conservation District would be a fabulous partner because they've done a lot of chemical control on Pymatuning and some other lakes in the area that have hydrilla and frog bit. So connecting with them. The time frame most likely is going to be more anticipatory because it takes a while to kind of figure all these things out, get the right permits, you have to get the herbicide, you have to make a treatment plan, all of those things. You also have to figure out what your cost is going to be. So as we sit down and kind of talk about this, we figure out that the cost for a year of treatment is going to be about $11,000. Benefits here, we're going to decrease the infestation and we're going to move more towards our goal of eradication. Resources needed, obviously that funding that's going to help us make those purchases. We might need a boat. We're going to have to get a hold of the herbicide. We might need a certified applicator and we might need permits. So those are all resources we have to think about. And the cons are that this is more of an ongoing long-term effort with continuous costs that are going to occur over time. It's not going to be a quick fix. So we also want to remember that we talked a lot about education and outreach. And so another action that we talk about is installing aquatic invasive species prevention signage throughout the reservoir. So you can see here, this is a Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers, Clean Your Gear sign. I had mentioned that there's access for anglers. So there's a couple different versions of this sign. There's one for boaters, there's ones for canoes and non-motorized boats, and clearly here there's one for anglers. So we're thinking that the angler sign might be most appropriate, and Pennsylvania Sea Grant is a partner here because we're able to provide these signs. These are relatively large aluminum signs that we can provide at access points throughout the state. You may have seen some of these around the state already, or you might already have one. But this is minimal cost. It can be done immediately. And the benefit is that it's increasing awareness of prevention action to the recreational water users that are visiting the reservoir. Resources, obviously, you need the signs. You might need some wooden posts, however you want to hang it, a couple random things. Not really a con here. And then continuing with education, we also want to consider an action to provide aquatic invasive species prevention materials during Mercer County Conservation District events. So again, we can partner with Sea Grant because we do have a lot of these resources to provide to our partners. Things like that you can see Protect Our Waters brochures, so actual information that can be handed out to the public about invasive species and clean, drain, dry. We have giveaways, key floats, water bottles, a number of different resources that can be shared to help raise awareness and make that prompt for taking outreach steps. Again, immediate time frame, minimal cost, and it provides action, prompts to action, and increasing awareness without a lot of downside to that. All right, so you made it through. Congratulations. You have successfully identified and reported water chestnut, decided how to respond, and you chose your path to take action. You can celebrate. Woohoo, I already saw somebody doing that. That's wonderful. But there's always a but. So we'll throw that in there. Because you know, if you're working with aquatic invasive species, it's never over. There's always follow-up actions and continuous management that needs to happen for invasive species. So one thing that you have to remember is that it's important to evaluate your response. So once you've gone through all of these steps and taking all of this action, you want to ask questions to yourself, like, were the response objectives met? Are there ways that we can improve and do better next time? Or what went well? Making note of that as well is important. But kind of capturing those lessons learned so that you can make sure that you're learning from those response actions and taking action maybe differently next time. You might need to develop a continued monitoring program to make sure, all right, so, we did some hand pulling events, we did some chemical treatments. Is it gone for good? We want to make sure it doesn't come back. Or if you've managed to decrease the level of the infestation, making sure that that doesn't increase again. So being on top and aware of that. If there's damage to your ecosystem from whatever the invasive is, you might want to consider restoration actions as part of your follow-up. And then again, ongoing maintenance, whatever that might look like. So make sure you're considering those things as well. I'm going to wrap up with some of the additional resources that we have in the rapid response plan that can help you as you're going through this process. Funding is always a huge one. We do have a funding matrix in Appendix G of the rapid response plan. And this is not all encompassing. We know that funding sources are constantly shifting and changing, but this can give you a general idea if you're looking for some ideas to fund a rapid response, whether it's through state grants like PALMS, or there's different watershed restoration protection program grants that run through the state. We're looking federally at things like the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative or the Aquatic Invasive Species Management Plan implementation funds. There's also regional grants that will fund rapid response actions like the Mid-Atlantic Panel on Aquatic Invasive Species. There's foundation funding. And then this isn't quite funding, but just making note that there are also entities that provide things like technical assistance and expertise, like the Consortium for Scientific Assistance or CSAW. So you may be asking yourself, did I completely make up that whole scenario with water chestnut? And the answer is no. That was completely based on a real life scenario that we were able to take and create a case study out of. So it's another tool in the toolbox for the rapid response plan is we have right now 4 case studies. We have a subcommittee of the Invasive Species Council called the Rapid Response Subcommittee, and we have worked to create 4 case studies on actual rapid responses that have happened in Pennsylvania for the purpose of helping others who might be in similar scenarios, looking at their lessons learned, looking at the costs, looking at the contact that they might be able to reach out to. And I actually made a note that in 2023, this particular case study was used by a resource manager in Indiana County in partnership with Penn State Extension to organize a water chestnut event and also develop a management plan for a water chestnut. So people were looking at this and saying, I'm going to reach out to Nick Trevelli, who was actually the contact for this response at Mercer County, and get information and partnership to help us then take action. We did receive funding to create an additional six rapid response case studies. So those are going to be in development this next coming year here. So we're going to have a nice compendium of resources to help folks looking at different species and different areas of the state for rapid response. Oh, and I also will just note that this subcommittee, if you have interest in rapid response, there's a group of us that occasionally get together to work on things like updates to the plan, as well as things like these case studies. So if you'd like to get involved, we would love that. Please let me know. I also have to put a pitch out for the Pennsylvania Sea Grant website. Again, there's the QR code to get to the website where we have a number of different aquatic invasive species resources like fact sheets. You can get the apps, guides, videos, all kinds of things. So please do visit and take a look at that. And then also a plug for the Pennsylvania Governor's Invasive Species Council website, which you can access through the QR code there. This houses a lot of our really important invasive species management information, such as our invasive species management plan, as well as the rapid response plan. So that's where it's actually housed, and you can find it there. Last, I have to make a plug for an upcoming event that Pennsylvania Sea Grant is hosting in partnership with the Invasive Species Council. So this is an angler engagement session that is focused on round goby, and we're looking for participation specifically from anglers. We're really hoping to hear a lot of voices at the table to help us understand better anglers' experiences with brown gobies, any types of barriers that they might face to, preventing the spread, what their knowledge and awareness is. It's going to help us as resource managers better create strategies for prevention and make sure that what we're doing is being received by anglers and working for them. So we're trying to get as many anglers to participate as possible. If you are an angler, if you are part of an angling group, if you know anglers and you are willing to share this information, that would be wonderful. The session is going to be December 6th in Meadville, Pennsylvania at Allegheny College, and the QR code to register is also right there on the screen, and I think Amber will put it in the chat. I think I've gone on long enough. I really appreciate your attention. I hope that you've learned something about rapid response in Pennsylvania. I would really appreciate if you can fill out the evaluation that can help us know, like, did you learn something? Are there things we could have done better? Are there other topics that you would like to hear trainings about? All of that's really, really important for us to see and understand. So thank you again, and I will take questions if there are any.
Hey, Sarah, we have a couple questions in the Q&A. And also, while I'm pulling that up, a lot of people saying very interesting, great presentation, things like that. I really love the choose your own adventure theme.
I thought it'd be more fun.
So this came in right as we started the webinar, but I think it really ties nicely into what you talked about. Bill Beeler asks, when I talk to lake associations or property owners about AIS, a common question is about how much waterfowl or other wildlife contribute to spread. I try to bring it back to the idea of concentrating on controlling what you can, such as proper cleaning of boats and gear. But Bill asks, is there any data on wildlife as a vector?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I like how you kind of framed like what we can control, because that really is the key there is yes, wildlife can spread invasive species in a number of different ways, whether it's stuck to fur, stuck to feathers, whether they consume something and seeds are distributed. Things like New Zealand mudstail can be consumed by fish. and not digested and, released elsewhere, defecated elsewhere. So definitely nature plays a role. However, humans play a much larger role, and we can control our actions to significantly reduce the risk of that spread happening. So yes, it happens. I don't have specific, data on percentage of occurrence or anything like that. I'm sure there's some papers that have looked at different instances of that, but we focus quite a bit on human movement.
Thank you. Bailey asks, do you work with DCNR and other agencies to tackle these invasives, or does Sea Grant run its own initiatives? Which you touched on that, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, no way. Definitely partnerships. Like we work very collaboratively. When we created the rapid response plan, like when we first initially developed it, all of our agency partners were involved, provided input. We work a lot through the Invasive Species Council, as I mentioned, where there's a number of agencies and organizations that are present on the council and as part of the Rapid Response Subcommittee. So DCNR is DCNR is the jurisdictional authority for invasive species that are found on state parks. So, for example, there's been a number of rapid responses that have come through that have been led by Nick Decker and his team. And I love seeing that because they always CC me on responses that have happened for different plants, and I can see them working through the plan, and I really appreciate that. So it's a huge team effort, and I would say that they probably have a much larger role in that with things that are found on state parks than anyone else. So.
Wonderful, thank you. Randy would like to know if you can post your slides somewhere that they can be downloaded.
Yes, so we can definitely make this information available to everybody in a slideshow. And again, we are also are recording the presentation. So if you want to share it or watch it back again, you're welcome to do that as well. But we'll definitely make sure things are available.
Wonderful. I think there were some in the chat, so I'm going to switch over to there briefly. Jane would like to know, is it possible to get a copy of the Aquatic Hitchhiker poster?
Oof,
So
what
I'm
was the
thinking
poster?
the fisherman, the angling poster that you showed.
The sign?
Yeah.
The aluminum sign. So as far as I know right now, we are providing some of those angler signs to Union City, and after that we are out of them. But I know that DCNR is, I've been talking with DCNR about another print run of those signs. And because of all the federal freezes and funding that are happening right now, that's on hold. But we will have access later on to more signs. And so if anyone's interested in those signs, please reach out to me and let me know. My email's right on there. So
Thank you. Gary would like, this is a call out from me. Gary is a superstar Master Watershed Steward volunteer, and he would like me to talk quickly about how we were able to do a rapid response to water lettuce that was found in Conneaut Lake. Is that okay with you, Sarah?
sure, take it away.
So this is a really great example of rapid response and actions and multi-agency communication with volunteers in play. Gary was assisting with a survey, a plant survey on Conneaut Lake, and many of you saw a picture of Gary and I doing a survey at Tuning with a giant rake full of weeds. So Gary was there when they found water lettuce in Conneaut Lake for the first time, and Brian Pilarchik, the Crawford County Conservation District watershed specialist, said, "Well, we should organize a pool because it's in a small localized population and eradication might be possible if we pool it. It doesn't reproduce through fragmentation, so manual removal was the best method of removal and control." So Gary said, "Why don't I call Amber and see if we can get the volunteers together to do a removal?" And so he called me on site. I spoke with Gary, Brian, as well as staff from the Fish and Boat Commission and DCNR and confirmed that we could do the removal. We scheduled it. We got a few volunteers out there. three volunteers in particular, Gary, Susan, and Linda, they went out and they combed the lake and they removed as much water lettuce as they could possibly find. And they did like formal transects across the lake and removed pieces of water lettuce that were as small as even just a dime. So it was a really, really great example of how rapid response can really work. And so, not just like the game that you all went through here today, but a really wonderful demonstration of something that we did in September, which is great. There you go.
Awesome, thank you.
Uh, sure. Thank you for the opportunity. Um, Bailey would like to know, she's seeing numerous photos of striders. What do we think we should do with striders when they capture them? Should they report them?
Striders? Like
Like water
water
spiders, water
striders?
striders?
Um, I understand that those are native. I don't have any experience with them, so I'm sorry I can't really speak to that. My understanding is that they're native, so I don't think you would report them. I think they're supposed to be there and part of the ecosystem, but you can all yell and throw things at me if I'm somehow wrong there.
I would tend to concur. But again, if we're wrong, please let us know. Bill would like to know, are the aluminum signs for both boats and anglers available to private lake associations?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, Scott would like to know, are you taking suggestions for additional case studies that will be developed through the subcommittee?
Oh, I love that question. Absolutely. We would love input. We're constantly looking to try to find, some of these really awesome stories of whether it's success or maybe it's not, but ways to share information that will help other people moving forward with doing rapid responses. So, Scott, please reach out to me. If you have ideas, I would love to hear them.
Wonderful. And there's a bunch of more shout outs. Way to go, Sarah. All the information is helpful. Everyone liked the game format. Um, Rhiannon, apologies if I'm saying your name wrong. They would like to know, do you have any tips on organizing a volunteer base for invasives removal?
I'm gonna pass that to you.
So, yes, I think what we did was successful in that we created a small blurb on social media and an email that circulated around to the different organizations in the area, whether that be kayaking clubs, angling clubs, lake associations, things like that, and as well as touching on all of our volunteers in the Master Watershed Stewards in Northwest PA. So wherever you're located, you can always check out Penn State Extension's Master Watershed Steward program and see if there's a local program near you or a program close enough where you could lean on those volunteers for assistance. The one thing that I will say is that we are lucky enough to have the ability to get additional liability insurance through Penn State. So that's something to consider if you're organizing a public volunteer invasive species removal event. You may or may not need that insurance depending on where you're working. So it really does work, though, as Gary states in
I'm
the
seeing
chat.
in the chat that they meant sliders, not striders.
I see that
I want,
too. I'm
I
so
wondered that. Sliders. Let's talk about red-eared sliders. Yes, red-eared sliders are invasive species. If you're finding them, use the app if you can to check and see have they already been reported. You know what? Just report them. I think that's totally fine. It's important to know where they are in the state. So I would say yes, report them, take pictures, make sure you're taking down location information. We're finding a lot more of that happening, because they're a pet that gets released very frequently. We did a little bit of work on Presque State Park looking at red-eared sliders and what the distribution was of red-eared sliders on Presque State Park. But there's definitely what we call hot spots of like where people are releasing these things. So it's interesting to have that information throughout the state. So sorry about the sorry about thinking you meant water striders. But yes, please do report red-eared sliders.
Yes. And Sarah, to add on to that, I think it's always important to report if you find something because you don't necessarily know if it's new to your county. So you can't over-report something.
Yeah.
The worst that can happen is that it goes to Sean Hartzell and he confirms and then gets back to you and says, well, it's already there. It's not a target for rapid response, but thank you for reporting it. But you can under-report things. So reporting is really important and is always encouraged.
Any other questions?
I'm gonna give it just a couple seconds.
While we're waiting, I'll just make
Striders
the plug
versus
again to make
sliders.
sure you fill out the evaluation if you can. Yes, New Zealand mud snails. Yes, report those. Report them, report them. Some people have came to me and said, well, there's like some counties that aren't filled in the app. And I'm like, well, that's because they're not getting reported. Like you have to report them for us to know about them and fill them in. So make sure if you're seeing something, you are reporting it. Yes, Sean reiterated he'd rather have someone report a false alarm than have something pass under the radar. So yes, thank you.
Samantha would like to know, will something be posted in the new fishing summary guide?
That might be a Sean question. I'm not sure. I know that there's been in the past invasive species information, regulations, Fish and Boat Commission makes sure to include that kind of information in the guide.
Okay. Yes, Sean says yes, we have AIS and regulation info in the guide. Woohoo. Okay, I'm not seeing anything else come in, Sarah. So if you'd like to wrap up, I think this
But there's
wonderful.
another
Oh,
question. There's another question. Do you use reports for My Naturalist? So that's a good question. Um, you have to be a little bit careful because of the verification process. So we want to make sure that if reports are showing up that they're verified, that they actually are what they say they are. So that's why we recommend like we would rather have reports come directly to Sean so that he can do that verification process. If something then gets reported to iNaturalist as kind of like the second step, that's great. But most of the time, we're going to recommend that reports come directly to the source first so that we can then do the verification process. And yeah, so Sean's saying that from Fish and Boat Commission's end, they don't consider iNaturalist a valid reference for exactly those reasons. So think about those three ways that we talked about reporting, and then we can share the information out, or you can, report it and then go to iNaturalist. Yeah, and Kylie says that they at state parks have had people tag them on iNaturalist when they observe things in state parks, which is great. And they can then take that conversation to email afterwards and get more details to then verify with park staff. Thanks for the little clapping icon floating around. Hearts. Hearts to you too. Thank you. We have three
not
minutes
seeing
left. If
anything else come
there's
in, Sarah.
no more questions, I think we can end it and hope you were able to eat lunch while going through all of that. Thank you all. Amber, I'm wondering, does the webinar chat get saved in the report out as well?
I can I can save it.
Okay. Just like to see some of the answers. When I was reporting, I couldn't see all the like response answers for things. So
Yep, I just saved it.
cool. All right. Last call for any questions or comments. A turtle.
Slider versus Strider is the theme of the day.
Thank you. Thank you. Amber can do anything. We know.
Thanks, Gary. So can Sarah.
All right, people are dropping off. So I'm gonna, I think, go ahead and shut it down.
Okay.
Stop recording.